We were running barefoot down the beach, and I thought, well, here's my opportunity. So I asked her, what about pre-Columbian American civilizations? And she told me the Spanish were so thorough at destroying all of the evidence of what those cultures have to offer. We will be more than 100 years getting to the point where we understand anything about American cultures. But you just said two places. You said Acadia, I know where that is, and you said Peru. Those literally on the opposite sides of the world. They may be on this hemisphere, but one is at the southern part of this hemisphere, and the other is at damn near the most northern part of the. And you're telling me that it is your impression that there was communications over that distance between those ancient people?
I do believe so, because if you ever read Thor Heyerdahl's books, he wrote many books such as Fatu Hiva, The Ra Expeditions, Early Man in the Ocean. What he shows is that it is quite possible to take even a small boat mixed with three people, put three different people of religions on that boat, such as a Muslim who can't eat fish and such things, and actually travel across the ocean and find these people.
Well, do you place any importance on the Moai down in the southern Pacific?
On Easter Island?
Mm-hmm.
For which civilization? Because I know that a lot of their, they only have one stone wall on the island, and it's only about 15 to 20 feet long. But the sculpture and the way it's put together matches directly with what the Southern American tribes were doing at the same time. Say
the Incas and those folks down there were building stone structures similar to the short wall that still exists in Easter Island. And there is some distance, and the currents create problems for communications between the mainland and Easter Island, because it's easy to get sucked up into the straits of down there at the southern tip of South America, into those heavy seas. Do you make it, there is this map that exists that causes a lot of people concern. It exists probably from pre-Columbian times, and it's a map of a coast of our Antarctica that has been covered for thousands of years by ice. Do you make anything of that?
What you're talking about is the Peary Rise map.
Yeah.
And that's from the 1500s. He actually copied that map from an older map. And the interesting thing is that all of that is underwater. And if you follow what archaeologists say, then the only way he could have known all of that is either A, to have had sonar type of technology where he could map the under of the ocean, or he had to have been there, or the map makers had to have been there at a time where Antarctica didn't have ice on. And this goes back to what we call the either Earth crust displacement, precession of the equinox, where the Earth is moving. And through evidence, it's actually possible to support the idea that at one time, within the last 15,000 years, Antarctica was ice-free, so it was possible to make that map.
At one time, it was an equatorial kind of climate, because you go deep enough down there, you begin to find stumps of fern trees. So the Earth has gone through an awful lot of change. Now, what about the length of time that we estimate there was human habitation of this planet? What do you think about those figures?
The thing for me is, when I'm doing this research, everybody will throw out a different number. Archaeologists, of course, say Sumeria was the cradle of civilization, the Fertile Crescent. That goes back roughly 4,000 years. But then they don't seem to acknowledge that Hinduism goes back 8,000 years. And before that, they're finding in the Middle East a place called Göbekli Tepe, which is, according to carbon dating, 11,000 years old. And then you go back even further, and then you have the underwater city of Dwarka, which Lord Krishna from the Hindus was supposed to have thrived in. They found that underwater, and that's supposed to be about 9,000 years old. So you can continually go back. Then under the waters right off of Cuba. They're finding a civilization that has pyramids, has many structures, and it's over 1,000 feet underwater, and that is 15,000 years old. And if you continually go back, then you get into this controversial subject about, well, sometimes every now and then you find a human handprint next to a dinosaur that's been fossilized, or you find a tool that seems to have been inside a rock for millions of years, or if you want to go back 3 billion years, they're finding these seemingly artificially created balls in clay in South Africa, in 3 billion year old clay.
Well, what is one then to believe about what is the shelf life of good data? All right, we say we know this. How long is it going to take before this is disproven?
Which part?
Any part. You see that? You see, that's just it. What you're doing, and legitimately so, is you're challenging the readily available ideas about human race, civilization development, tool making, all of this. Well, those ideas used to be a lot. Actually, they were a lot more fixed when I was in college than they are now. I mean, axioms that we believed. Well, this was true because this is what archaeologists tells us, and so we buy that, and we go on with life, and then subsequent archaeologists come along, and they find something else out, and that challenges it. It moves these dates around, shifts them back and forth. I mean, what about civilizations that are underwater now in the Black Sea, and what about the stories of the flood and all of those things that are now under closer scrutiny than they have been for the last 25 or 30 years?
Well, there is a lot of pressure on the scientific and archaeology community to talk about the flood myth, because there are over 2,000 flood myths in the world. And there are a lot of civilizations underwater, most of them wiped out, such as in the Bahamas, you have the Bimini Roads, or in Japan, you have the controversial Yonaguni Monument, where half of the scientific community says, yes, it's a structure because we found skeletons there, and half of it says, no, those people just drowned, etc., etc. I think a clear date to go back to would be roughly about 30,000 years ago. A lot of scientists agree that roughly 30,000 years ago, some giant expansion did happen, and that's where you start seeing a lot of people starting to get ideas of their own. On cave walls, you start seeing these 30,000-year-old cave paintings and so on. And all around the world, it seems like a light switch just clicked on.
Does the Dryas extinction figure in all this? Because there's another form of archaeology that has developed in recent times is DNA for archaeological purposes. And according to that standard, we had the Dryas extinction, and it said that the world may have been diminished to 5 productive females, and the rest of us wiped out. Well, before that, were there civilizations?
I believe so. I do believe so. I've actually read a lot of articles where people are finding all these weird things hundreds of feet deep, and if you look at sediment layers, that would make them thousands upon hundreds of thousand years old. But the thing is that in many times in our history, the world has had major cataclysms. It's a miracle that we've survived and become this technologically advanced, because major cataclysms happen all the time. Such as the one you were talking about. Then there's the flood myth. There was a comet, etc., etc. And not to mention that, maybe we had to deal with dinosaurs and all that. So there have been a lot of extinctions that have taken place, volcanoes, etc. So, we just keep rebuilding.
Are we to conclude that we live in a relatively fragile environment?
Yeah, I do believe so. If you look at all these earthquakes that are happening now, and the tornadoes are happening, I think that happened a lot. It's been happening. How many people die from it every year? Now, right now we have 7 billion people on Earth, and so, when 300,000 people die in an earthquake or a nuclear explosion or what have you, it's a relatively small number. But in ancient days, when there were only 100,000 people on Earth, it's like taking an arm or a leg off.
You were talking earlier about the axis wobble. Tell us about that. What is that about? How does it develop? And when does it wobble so far off course that it makes significant change to how the world works?
Well, the axis wobble is the turning of the Earth. And the Earth is not like a basketball where there's one point at the top, one point at the bottom, and then just starts spinning. If you spin a ball on your finger, or if you spin a spinning top, you'll notice that after a second or two, it wants to start changing its spin. And this is exactly what the Earth does, because the Earth is also spinning through space. And after a while, it just gets so big, the spin gets so big that the Earth has to readjust. And they have found times in history where this actually has happened. In the book Atlantis Blueprint by Rand Flem-Ath and Colin Wilson, they've actually shown two distinct places where that used to be the north of our Earth. And the way you could tell that is when in the ocean, when sand settles, the compass inside of them points directly north. But from the rocks that we found in around these certain areas, they actually point towards these certain areas rather than north, but that's obviously a few layers down, and they could actually see that it has happened like 20,000 years ago, 40,000 years ago, and so on.
Axis shifts when north changes out for south and south changes out for north. What's that all about?
Well, you probably heard it in the news, because that's a big craze in the news right now. The shifting is the North and the South Pole. The whole solar system is going through a large shift right now. Everybody thinks that global warming is just on Earth, but every planet is going through all these weird changes that we're just starting to try and understand. And right now our north is actually shifting to the south and south to the north, and it's gone a few hundred miles in the past few years. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens gradually.
Gradually in human terms, not necessarily gradually in geological terms.
Exactly.
Geological terms is inherently gradually. What's up? How's that going to affect us?
There's certain studies that they have done where they put helmets on people and they reverse their polarity in their head, and because you have all these odd wires, you actually have a compass in your head. A lot of people don't know about that. We've actually evolved.
We from East Texas do. You can run me through an operating dryer, pull me out blindfolded, and I can point to north, because I was born in East Texas. We have to know northeast, southwest.
And there's all these weird things in your head, like the magnets and all that when these shift, people actually get a new, higher perspective on the Earth.
Do you have any theories about the afterlife?
I do have theories. I have a lot of theories. That's one of the books that I'm working on right now.
Okay. Tell us about it.
Well,
tell us what, excuse me, let me say, my name is Ray Hill. You're listening to Ray on the Radio. It's Thursday. We have a guest on Thursday, and John McAdam is our guest today. He's a young man who is thinking about the world differently, and he is sharing that with us here today. And you're welcome to join. It's about the halfway of the program. And the deal I have with you, my listening audience, is that when I have a guest in here, you don't mess with us. You let me get him warmed up and get him comfortable before you attack him. But if you want to give us a call in and ask a question, John will either decide to answer it or he'll answer another question. If he does, you just shut up. The number is 713-222-0715. Ray on the Radio, and today's guest, John McAdam, a young man who's looking at the world differently, probably on purpose. So you're welcome to join us and get part of the conversation. I'm glad to see a goodly number of you out there have found us. Thank you. The number is 713, that's Houston, 222, that's like downtown, 0715. Give us a call and talk to me and John on Ray and the Radio. Excuse me, John, I have to do that about midpoint.
No, that's fine.
Unplug it.